Hi, I'm Dr. Joel Kreisberg.
And I'm Reggie Marra, and we're here to talk with you today about the release of our new book, Coaching and Healing, subtitled Transcending the Illness Narrative, and also our upcoming class on narrative healing. So, Joel, what's the connection between the book release, which we're really happy about, and the class itself?
Well, Coaching and Healing is a fabulous project, if I do say so myself, that you and I are co-authors with 10 other coaches who spent several years now inquiring into healing as it becomes an element in the coaching process. As we did that work, we began to understand that we were really discussing a narrative healing, or a form of healing about the way we use words. And it seems very relevant that narrative healing fits the coaching way of interacting with a client. So I'm going to pass it back to you. How would you define narrative healing?
I mean, well, first I'll say that I'm happy to say that I was practicing narrative healing probably for a couple of decades before I knew what it was as a writer and a poet. But for me, narrative healing is a process through which either telling a story or writing a story helps me broaden my perspective on whatever it is I'm dealing with. In my case, it was the death of some family members. It was a loss of the use of both of my hips until they were replaced. So it's a perspective shift through narrative, through storytelling.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And then what I would do, I spin it a little differently. I mean, folks know that I'm a health coach and an integrated physician. And so for me, narrative healing is actually the same thing, use of story, which is what you're saying, use of our story, use of our self-understanding, and includes what you just said. Our perspective changes, and through that perspective change, healing occurs. Okay, and very often that healing occurs, it has a lot to do with growing and understanding ourselves differently, and then being able to use our bodies, use our emotions, be with our thoughts in a way that doesn't seem to require so much pain and suffering.
Yeah, I like that you specifically spoke to using our bodies, using our emotions, and I would even add, and I know this is included in what you said, heart and spirit as well, because it's important to be very clear that when we say narrative healing, we're not talking about just a verbal approach. I mean, words are obviously part of it because that's how we humans, that's one way we humans interact, but we're speaking about really a holistic or an integrated approach to healing. And the story is held not only in our minds with language, but is held in every cell of our bodies. And that's what we're really speaking about.
Exactly. So narrative healing actually becomes the language we use to talk about the process, the way that healing and narrative show up in a coaching model. And then in Coaching and Healing, it's a wonderful book because it has two kind of different streams through it. One, it has a series of the author's healing narratives. Okay, and so Howard, tell us a little bit about that part, Reggie.
Yeah, so before we knew this was going to be a book, 8 of the 10 of us, Joel said there were 12, but it's impossible to write a book with 12 people. We only did it with 10. 8 of the 10 of us actually wrote our current healing narratives, what we were actually working on in our own lives as we were meeting once a month before we knew it was going to turn into a book. And what we found, now that the book is in print, is that the integration of these 8 real-life healing narratives with the methodology that we use is a wonderful integration. It shows not just that we know some methods and that we're coaches, but that everyone, and I would say if you're human, you're included in this, everyone has a healing process and a healing story. And we pretty much put our money where our mouth was, so to speak, by sharing our own.
Yeah, so the book has these narratives. They're separate sections, which are first person. They're my experience of healing, and they're wonderful stories. And then in between that, we talk about methodology, coaching methodology, and there's 2 real themes that go with that. Which is, one is that we're all trained as integral coaches through the Integral Coaching Canada, and so we actually talk about that methodology and how it applies to working with a client that has healing, has illness, has trauma, has grief as part of the coaching process. So it's, and that required us to actually, explain the Integral Coaching Canada methodology without getting in too much detail, because it's a robust teaching methodology.
Right.
And for us, we tried to frame it within, actual stories and case studies. So we have, I think 6 is perhaps the number of actual clinical case studies, where you're seeing different coaches working in different ways using the methodology for different types of conditions. Some very much more medical anxiety, and others about the type of fear that inhibits one making a career change, or they're good stories, and it makes the book eminently readable because it's show don't tell. There's a way in which we really kind of put this together, and since there were 10 of us, we had a rich ground to grab from. So it's I don't know, I've given it to many people, and they seem to really like it.
And I want to go back to the healing concept just for a moment, because I say this partially tongue-in-cheek, but it's literally true. When I chose to become part of this group some 4 years ago, when we were all asked to decide, which initiative we're going to join, and I looked around the room, and I really believe that virtually every coaching topic, whether you're an executive coach, you're a health and wellness coach, you're a life coach, almost virtually every topic is a healing topic. Some are more severe or intense than others. But even if I just achieved a goal and I'm trying to figure out what's next in my life, part of that coaching topic for me is the loss of the goal and finding out what's next. So there are different levels and intensities of healing, but healing is something that I think is occurring pretty much regularly in our lives. It's not always about a physiological or mental illness that we're talking.
Right, which actually gives us an opportunity to do one of my key distinguishing frames, which is the difference between a pathogenic worldview and a salutogenic worldview. So often salutogenic's a word that people aren't familiar with, so you think of it as salutary, greeting the world, saying hello. So it's the positive life is an opportunity, and how can I grow? How does it do I flourish? How do I become better? How do I heal? So that's a salutogenic versus a pathogenic. So one of my, this is one of my big influences on the group, is there's this bias that we're not aware of, which is that when I have a pain, I have a symptom, I have an illness, I have too strong of feelings, there's something wrong that needs to be fixed. That's a pathogenic approach. So I'm going to fix that problem, and it has a lot of causality. I'm going to study it, and I'm going to test things out, A and B and placebo, and then we're going to see that it gets fixed. And by itself, it's not a faulty perspective. It's just a limited perspective, right? It's not always true. And it turns out that there's a different perspective that says that symptom or that grief or that feeling is information that can allow me to, back to what we said, to grow my perspective, to understand myself in the world, to have more coherence about the way I understand my life. And that becomes healing in the way that you just defined healing perfectly well. The opportunities for healing are and they're everywhere.
Yeah. And the conversation between salutogenic and pathogenic approaches leads me to just chime in with the difference between healing and curing. And there's not a direct correlation where salutogenesis deals with healing and pathogenesis deals with curing. I'm not saying that, but in the book, we really do speak to the difference between healing and curing, where curing is, in fact, fixing something or removing something that we no longer want, whereas healing is that perspectival shift again. In an ideal world, we'd love to have both of those when they're possible, but it's perfectly possible to have either one of them without the other. I can heal without having a cure for something, and I can cure something without ever really healing. Both of those are possible.
Yeah, and so now what's happening is you're starting to hear us move from, well, this is all in the book. So we encourage you, but when you read this, today is our big press release announce day that you're watching this particular video. So we'd love to have you buy the book. There is actually I think the preface of the book is downloadable on our website. Or is it the front, the forward, the preface?
The preface.
Preface. And then, so what happened is, as we, started to develop a school in narrative health coaching, we ended up realizing that we needed to create a course that really addressed some of the principles, this narrative healing principle. So the course is called Narrative Healing. Reggie is going to be teaching the next class, which starts October 4th. And in this class, we actually start to really wrestle with, well, you just heard it, salutogenesis versus pathogenesis, coaching and healing. What else would you say about the class, Reggie?
Well, the first thing I'll say is we request experiential. So we do talk about salutogenesis and pathogenesis, curing and healing, but we experience it. We actually, all of the participants in the class begin to write their own healing narrative. And we get into the nuts and bolts of the impact of a healing narrative, first in just acknowledging it, recognizing we have some control over our story, what happens when we share it, and what happens when people respond to our sharing. And while the class is designed to be of use to practitioners, coaches or doctors or nurses or physicians' assistants, and even teachers and parents, it's a useful methodology, the ability to really engage a healing narrative for anybody who wants to heal. And you can't really do that as a coach or a doctor or a nurse or anyone with your clients or patients unless you've had the courage and taken the time, I would say, to engage your own healing narrative.
Well, so that's a really interesting point. So in other words, what we're saying is that the learning methodology that you use in the class is you got to do it yourself. And through the process of doing it yourself, then you have the skill, or you begin to have the capacity to develop the skill to do with others. So often, coaches and health professionals are, well, what's this going to have to do with my practice? Well, you're building the skills of you being able to use narrative healing and facilitate healing narratives with clients and patients.
Yeah.
And you can walk away with that skill. It's not the here's how you do it kind of class. It's here's let's do it kind of class. And as we do it and share it and come to understand our own story, then when we get near the end, we say, well, now what do we do happens when we start to do it in a professional setting? So the professional setting is important to it as well. It's just not the learning story. Yeah. It's the conclusion, in a way.
Well, the way we teach is we model how to do it by immersing the participants in the doing of it. So it's just completely experiential, with the conceptual and research-based, backbone as well.
Absolutely, and so there's continuing ed units available for the International Coaching Federation for coaches. That's right now. It's been where this is embedded in a larger class called the Certificate Program in Narrative Health Coaching, and so narrative healing is one of the components of narrative health coaching, and we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about narrative health coaching right now, because what we're celebrating is a book called Coaching and Healing and Narrative Healing.
Yeah. So I would like to just mention, I'm not going to mention all of the authors because I'm sure I'll leave one out. I don't have them listed in front of me, but I want to mention, in fact, we said the preface before, that John Stoddard is he actually wrote the preface for the book, and he was the one who had the idea of meeting as a group around coaching and healing. And then, Lois McNaughton, also one of our colleagues and authors, is the co-designer of this particular class, Narrative Healing. Just want to mention the two of them. And
Lois she's faculty at Teleosis Institute, so it's important to that she designed the class with you. And
having said that, I think it's so here's what the book looks like.
Thank you.
And we'll take just another few seconds because we've gone this far, and the other authors.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah. Alex Dowds, Amy Phillips, Julie Flaherty, Karen Hempel, Leslie Williams, and last, because this is the real world, and we're dealing with coaching and healing and transcending the illness narrative. One of our authors actually passed away on May 26th, 2016. Never saw the book get to print. Jill Lang Ward, who was a significant participant in this process, and you'll get to read her narrative and the details of her dealings with multiple myeloma in the last decade or so of her life. So 10 authors, one book. If you had asked me that if that were possible 5 years ago, I would have said no, but it was an amazing process.
It was a wonderful process. We're really excited about the book, and we're excited to share it with you. And so we hope you go to coachingandhealingthebook.com. There'll be a link in your website, which of course you can go to Amazon, and it's available as a paperback and as a Kindle edition book. I have both, and then it's read the book. And if you're interested in doing this work, we happen to have a class. The next one starts October 4th at Teleosis Institute, or teleosis.org is our website. And that class runs 4 times a year, so you'll get there when you're ready for it. It's a wonderful community process that we go through.
Yeah. So again, I'll be teaching that. It's all online. It's 4 Tuesdays, Eastern time. It begins at noon. On the west coast of the U.S., it begins at 9 a.m. And it's in other time zones too. I'm not going to list all of those, but I'd love to meet you. And have any questions, find us at teleosis.org. Shoot us an email. We're happy to speak with you.
Thanks.